Given the state of the world over the past few years, and some dramatic upheaval in my personal life, I've been diving into my happy place for a sense of comfort and stability. Naturally, we shouldn't let nostalgia dominate our existence, but when the world is just too much, and you've been in your own head for too long, there's nothing wrong with sinking into the things that make you happy, like a nice, relaxing, hot bath. That's the stuff. Hi, my name is Mira, and I want to have a little fun and dig into a few of the differences between the original Tomb Raider and its remake, Tomb Raider Anniversary, and how these games are actually about mental... Wait, hang on. Sorry, force of habit. For a long time, I have had a complicated relationship with video game remakes. I believe that part of appreciating an artistic medium's history should include the more mechanically dated aspects of it. For video games, I tend to prefer they be reworked or remastered for current hardware instead of being rebuilt from the ground up. Put a pin in that for later. However, I acknowledge that direct remakes ease the process of documenting the developments of a medium and the culture that creates it, because you get to examine the way two separate works of art are built upon the same foundation. I'll also add that in order for this comparison to be feasible, both versions of the piece in question need to be available, which is not always the case. Fortunately for our purposes, the Tomb Raider in question are available through multiple avenues, with more to come in the near future. The first Tomb Raider, made by the good folks at Core Design, released in 1996, and because we're relaxing right now, I'm not going to mention how many years ago that was. It was successful enough to become a giant multimedia franchise that I still love today. Lara Croft became a cultural phenomenon and my first video game hero. I played this game over and over when I was a kid. Well, I played the first 4 levels over and over, and the 5th, called St. Francis Folly, was too much for young me. At the time, 3D platforming was pretty new, and I was blown away by moving a 3D character through a space with depth and height. Look, the most recent 3D game I had played was Stunt Race FX on the Super Nintendo, and the less said about that, the better. Fast forward to teenage me in 2006, Tomb Raider Legend by Crystal Dynamics launched a new trilogy for the intrepid Lara Croft, and there I found my favorite version of her to this day. She's still cool, but there are moments where you can see that she just loves what she does.
Alistair, meet Tuanak. She's a lovely pre-Incan civilization, currently in ruins.
Something about this version of Lara spoke to me in a way that I would not understand for a very long time. I didn't just want to go on adventures like her, I wanted to be her. Naturally, this was something that didn't merit any further thought or examination, and I totally didn't consider the name Lara when changing my own name. The follow-up to Legend was Tomb Raider Anniversary, which remade the original game and carried over Lara's new skills and abilities. It's more a reinterpretation using the newer version of Lara than a typical remake, though not as wildly different as some remakes get. Levels are reworked to accommodate Lara's new gear and moves, with some areas made bigger and more fleshed out. Though I'm not fond of all the changes they made, it's a stellar example of renewing an older title without replacing it. One note before we proceed, though: dispel from your mind any notions of thing good or thing bad. I'm not judging either of these or ranking them. I love both games and like talking about how they differ. I'll dig into some things I prefer from each one, but the takeaway from this video should not be that one is better than the other, because that would be the least interesting way to approach this topic. Let's start the comparison by examining the absolute foundation of the way these games feel to play: Lara's movement. These games are thoroughly focused on the way Lara moves and interacts with her surroundings. Look at her control scheme. Out of 8 buttons, 5 of them are entirely dedicated to traversal. The odd ones out are Look, which helps you get a feel for your surroundings, Draw a Weapon, which does what it says on the tin, and Action, which is the sometimes Y of the set, as it interacts with contraptions, fires the guns once they're drawn, and holds onto ledges. If you look at the remaining shoulder buttons, you'll see Step Left, Step Right, and Walk. Before you even play the game, this should give you an idea of how deliberate the traversal is. In the original, Lara feels anchored to the ground, giving her a firm sense of gravity and weight. They're not quite tank controls, but they're not too far removed either. Whether running or walking, her feet feel firmly planted. In Anniversary, however, she feels loose. Maybe a little too loose. I feel about this connected to the ground when I'm having a derealization episode. I'll skip over a control overview of Anniversary because it's less succinct. But I will cover a few of the new additions, then jump right into some comparisons. The Anniversary Trilogy's biggest relevant additions are the grapple hook and poles, both horizontal and vertical, which bring a lot of new ways for Lara to get around. Anniversary itself restores a feature that was absent in Legend and would again be absent in Underworld, and the whole Survivor Trilogy. Manual grab. You see, in the original series, the player has to hold down the action button for Lara to keep her grip on whatever she's holding. That doesn't sound like a big challenge, but combine tense and sometimes lengthy platforming sections with anxious hand sweat, and it becomes a much bigger concern. Instead of making it mandatory, manual grab is an option that you can disable if you're not on board, which is a nice way to accommodate fans of the original games who missed it in Legend, and the new fans that Legend brought on board. Anniversary also added a twist to the grab, in that if you tap a button while Lara's holding on, Lara will move a little faster, but there's a rhythm to it, so it adds an extra little challenge, which is nice. Look at her go! As you clamber and tumble around in each game, you'll notice differences in Lara's physicality. Since we're already hanging around, Tomb Raider Anniversary made an addition here that I really like. As she holds on and you move the joystick to where you want her to jump, Lara looks in the direction you're pointing. This is good player feedback, and it sells that Lara is aware of her surroundings, and has incredible forearm strength. The original game also excelled at showing off her strength with movable objects. This is an area where the remake falls a little short. To demonstrate the difference, I'm going to show the interaction with the same object from level 2, in each game starting with Anniversary. Our explorer drops into this room. In the wall is a cage that you can push inward to get past, then climb on to reach a higher level of this house. This looks like she's pushing a somewhat unwieldy shopping cart. She pushes a much larger block in the first level of Legend, and it looks similarly effortless. Conversely, in the original game, look at the body language here. That thing is incredibly heavy, and her interaction with it absolutely sells how strong she is. Lara does not skip leg day. If your primary experience with Lara Croft is from the Survivor Trilogy, starting with Tomb Raider 2013, you may not know about Lara's acrobatic early days. The first game in the franchise had her jumping and flipping everywhere, and the PlayStation 2 games pushed her acrobatic prowess even further. You can jump around while fighting enemies, and it still feels satisfying in each game. You can even draw and holster your guns while you do this. In both versions, there are little touches like this, but they all make Lara feel better to control. Each game also uses her roll differently. In the original, it's an expedient means of turning around, but in the remake, she dives forward. A wonderful addition here is this little tumbling combo. I love it so much. I have no clue if it has practical application in the game, but as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't need one. It's just fun to do on its own. Similarly, both games have fun flourishes for the player that wants to show off a little, like the swan dive. And the handstand. They require some precise button inputs, and feel like a cool reward when you pull them off. I prefer the handstand in the original game because it displays how much control Lara has over her body, and the complex button combinations mirror that control as you have to press R1 and up while still hanging onto the ledge with X, which takes some practice to get used to. Now I'd like to highlight a few differences from the first few levels, starting with the bridges in level 1, the caves. This is the first real set piece in the game. It's a neat location in both games that gives you some space to really tinker with the movement mechanics. I especially love this chamber in Anniversary, with the second bridge being higher than the first, and a little surprise they threw in there for those familiar with the first game. We dipped into level 2 a bit in the previous section, but I want to dig a bit more into the city of Vilcabamba. I love the tall cave in Anniversary, but the original game takes this one for me. The perimeter around the city makes it feel bigger despite the lower ceiling, and some of these little alcoves give me the impression they were used to grow crops for the people who lived here. The temple is beautiful in both games. I like the jumps more in the original because they go much higher up and are far more tense as a result. However, Anniversary has a really cool door mechanism. Look at this thing. Anniversary has some fantastic larger-than-life ancient mechanisms. Speaking of which, the waterfall in level 3, the Lost Valley. The original has you approach from the top, which gives you a view down and the first great spot for a swan dive. But Anniversary approaches the waterfall from the bottom, and the majesty of this great device hits me every time. The Lost Valley also has the T-Rex encounter, and I gotta give it to the original on this one. Where Anniversary introduces this formidable foe with a quick time event cutscene and a boss fight, which is admittedly a cool fight. The original game just does this. This giant toothed monster running out from around the corner and charging Laura is utterly terrifying. The lack of a cutscene makes the whole encounter more immediately threatening. I love it. Now that I've piqued your interest in this pair of games, here are a few tips for playing these titles. First, jumping from poles in Anniversary doesn't require repositioning. Just push the stick in the direction you want to jump, then press the jump button. This will save you some time and headache. You are welcome. Second, in Tomb Raider 96, you'll need to adjust your instinctual approach to how you control Lara's movement. The past 30 years of game development have ushered in many changes to how game characters move within a 3D space. Currently, we're settled on pushing around the joysticks to move the character and camera independently from one another. However, the original Tomb Raider was made in a time when the PlayStation controller looked like this. Let's make it complicated, but just go with me here. As you play, take your thumb from the analog stick and move it to the directional pad on your preferred controller. Those aren't just quick select buttons, their purview once included the movement of player characters. And since the PSX Tomb Raider games are somewhat grid-based, you'll find Lara's movement a lot easier to manage with the D-pad. It'll take some acclimation, but I believe in you and your ability to work around your muscle memory. Third, when you pull a lever and the camera cuts away to show you what happened, you can move during the cutaway, which can be really helpful for timed doors. And last, there's an input delay when you take a running jump. You need to hold down the jump button while you're taking your run up. Just practice the timing while you're on some flat ground. In fact, go to the obstacle course in Lara's home, which you can access from the main menu. It's the tutorial, and it's super helpful if you aren't familiar with these games. Remember, traversal is part of the challenge here, which is something you don't see much in games these days. And I'm hoping that the current PSX revival will take a crack at this kind of play, because I dearly miss it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this more chill and relaxed video. I've been dealing with some personal challenges for the past couple of years, which have done a number on my creative drive, but I'm hoping to get things back on track this year. I've only shared a few things from the early levels because I want to keep the scope of this video manageable, but more importantly, I want you to go play these games. The original Tomb Raider is relatively easy to emulate and works wonderfully, and the PC version is on Steam and GOG. Anniversary is less easy to emulate, at least for me. I don't have the know-how to manage all these settings to get the game running on my computer. Fortunately, the game is also on Steam with controller support and GOG. I hope you check these games out and have a great time with them. To me, they're timeless adventures that deserve more love. Speaking of which, returning to the pin from the beginning of the video, there's a lovely looking remaster of the first 3 Tomb Raider games coming out on February 14th, which is today. So it looks like I actually have a date tonight. I'm gonna go get ready. Take care!